Hello, I'm Morris Berger. I'm MetroCount's Business Development Manager based here at MetroCount HQ in South Fremantle, WA. As part of the AITPM online conference, I'm privileged to be able to present some cycling information. Last year we looked at the immediate effects of COVID, and now we'll be able to look at some of the more in-depth long-term effects that COVID has presented to active transport in Australia. Globally and certainly nationally, we've got hundreds of the MetroCount permanent bicycle and pedestrian monitoring sites. Out of those, we've chosen 7 sites across Australia to look at cycling numbers in various locations. The 7 sites include this particular one at Leighton Beach in Fremantle. We've got an incredibly busy site in South Perth, the Sir James Mitchell Park Cycleway along the river. We head over to Adelaide at the Outer Harbour Greenway, Parramatta along the Parramatta River. In Melbourne we have 2 sites looking at the Bay Trail in Brighton, as well as the Albert Street separated curbside cycleway leading into and out of the city. We call that our Melbourne CBD site. And then down in Hobart, a relatively recent site in Kangaroo Bay. So how has the COVID pandemic and government policies even affected cycling numbers? Let's have a look at that from the period 2018 all the way through to 2021. The Sir James Mitchell Park site and the Brighton Bay Trail, as well as the Albert Street curbside separated cycleway, enjoyed about 10,000 cycle numbers per week. And they increased to almost double that, about 20,000, during the March to May 2020 COVID pandemic period. The first 2 sites in South Perth and Brighton saw reductions, still above the pre-COVID levels, 20% above, 30% above based on the seasons. And the only major change that's happened is the last few months with winter coming on and lockdowns in Melbourne. We're now looking at about a 15% reduction on pre-COVID levels. The Albert Street cycleway site dropped markedly, down to 70 or 80% drop from the pre-COVID levels. What's interesting though is numbers have gradually been increasing over the period of the last 12 months. Be interesting to determine whether that effect is from people using the new pop-up cycle lanes in the city and finding it a safer option to now continue on from Albert Street into the city, knowing that they've got a safe route to travel. Interestingly, the Sir James Mitchell Park cycleway in South Perth and the Brighton Bay Trail have nearby separated paths for pedestrians and cyclists. Numbers are so high that it's about time we separate people on foot from people cycling to reduce any interaction and possible crashes. With the final 4 sites, rider numbers have been quite low. This site in particular hasn't seen much change pre and post COVID. During that March to May period, numbers increased 2 to 3 times as more and more people not being able to get to work decided that they would have their recreation pastime being cycling. Of course, we have seen an incredible drop in the last few months here in Perth, as I said, with the rains, but it's not happening today, and we've got plenty of riders out and plenty of people on foot taking advantage of this separated bike path. Adelaide's Outer Harbour Greenway bucked the trend, steadily increasing numbers from well before COVID to now. 2,000 riders a week were previously enjoyed pre-COVID. 2,500 or so riders a week during the COVID pandemic period. But it's continued on. They've reached 2,500 riders a week many times since COVID in the last 12 months. Now the Parramatta River Cycleway is part of a major route travelling on both the north and the south side of the river, Olympic Park on one side, Parramatta on the other, and takes us through some beautiful areas like the Balladari wetlands. That's where this site is. Relatively few numbers on this cycleway. That increased 50% during the lockdown period, and then reduced to remain about 20 to 30% higher than pre-lockdown periods. What we're seeing though during this year, marked reductions to well below pre-lockdown levels, due in one part to the March rains and floods, if you recall, in Parramatta, flooded that whole area. And then with lockdowns subsequent to that. And finally, Hobart. The new shared path around Kangaroo Bay in Rosny Park enjoyed fewer than 1,000 cyclists a week when it was first built, rising after a few months to around 1,700. Then when lockdown arrived, well over 2,000 people enjoyed that path riding their bikes. Numbers have reduced to about 1,300 a week on average over the last 12 months. Now that's more than double the initial rider numbers when the path was first installed, showing the true benefit of introducing a shared path. We also compared these 7 sites seasonally. We've got 3 years worth of data. So we looked at spring 2018 all the way through to winter 2021. All sites other than the Melbourne CBD site showed increasing numbers in spring year on year. I guess weather patterns coming out of winter played an effect, but it's also showing the increased use of these cycle lanes as time moves on. Autumn numbers comparing 2019 to 2020 jumped markedly. That was the lockdown period that we saw last year. Coming to this year, they've dropped down in some cases to pre-COVID levels. In other cases, they've risen slightly higher than pre-COVID level. Be interesting to note what next year brings. Finally, one last point about the numbers, and that's looking at the type of mobility devices on the paths. You may not know, but we've been talking to many organisations for a few years now, that we can separate out scooters from bicycles, mopeds from cargo bikes, all using the piezo sensors embedded in the path in our permanent monitoring system. From these 7 sites, we've been able to see 2018 to 19 to 2020, huge increase in the number of scooters that are on our shared paths and cycleways now. In some cases, doubling the numbers from one year to the next. Now, as a mode share, they're about 2 to 3.5% of total. But we're still seeing those increases, which is great to see. These 7 permanent monitoring sites provide compelling data as to why we have separated shared paths and cycleways. 1, it removes vulnerable road users from roads such as this one behind us and creates an enjoyable way to get about. It provides corridors so that we can travel to parks, shopping centres, schools, transport hubs and the like safely and easily. Another point is reduction of congestion and therefore pollution by the addition of cycleways and shared paths. Not only can we monitor cyclists and pedestrians using these permanent monitoring systems, but we can monitor beside that the road traffic as well and look at the modal shift, how we're moving people from motor vehicles onto cycleways, and widely also comparing that to public transport use. Very important to keep collecting the data from the roadway as well as the bikeway. You can see from the graphs that have been going on while I've been talking, numbers have increased pre-COVID to post-COVID at all the sites, bar Melbourne, that CBD site. And there's good reason for that. People working from home rather than working in the city. But other than that, we've all been getting on our bikes. We've all been walking. We're using the separated cycle lanes. We've got pop-up cycle lanes appearing in Sydney and Melbourne. But look, we've got to keep the infrastructure going. We've got to keep the separated cycleways going. That is the only way that we're going to increase our numbers of people on bike, have a healthier community, safer community, reduce congestion, reduce pollution, and it'll benefit all of us. Thank you for the opportunity to present here. I look forward to the Q&A. I'm Maurice Berger, signing out for now. Bye.